So about 2 years ago, I came to my wife sitting at the dining room table at our old house, and I said, I think I want to build a steel frame home. I think I want to do something non-traditional, and I think we can be, I think we can even do it so we don't have a mortgage anymore. Right?
Yeah, and I said, "You're funny."
Yeah, dead serious. So that was over 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago. And now we are finished. So we got final inspection just a couple weeks ago. Appraisers coming in on Tuesday. And now we finally have had a chance to pretty much breathe. We're not 100% done with the bank and everything yet, but we've had a chance to breathe and kind of take a look at the last couple of years and all the craziness that has ensued. And yeah, just sort of, talk about it and think on it, meditate on it, and get to think about some of the lessons that were learned. So we did this. We decided to build a house with our own hands. Well, I actually, in full honesty, I thought I was going to do most of it. I remember saying like, oh, I can do most of it myself, and then I'll help you. You can help me move heavy stuff. That's not how it went at all. But we did it ourselves. We did about 90% of it ourselves, subbed out just a few items. While working full time, I've been working, 32 to 36 hours a week. The past couple of years, Sloan's working part time, while raising our son, our 8-year-old son, Atticus, and while pursuing embryo adoption and then pregnancy. And what else? I feel like there are other things that have gone on in normal life in the last 2 years that made this crazy.
I mean, we got a dog 2.5 years ago.
We got a dog.
So
that did make things more
middle
complicated.
Of everything, where to put him while we're building, it was a part of it.
Yeah. So we want to kind of share the story. I've had a lot of people ask me questions along the way, anything from like technical stuff to time management to motivation, but we're not going to get really too technical about the house here. It's not going to be a construction podcast. But really the main theme, the main question is like, how the heck did you pull this off? And people ask me like, I just don't get how you do this while working with a family and how you did everything yourselves. And I've never built a house before until this one. I have a woodworking background, somewhat of a woodworking background, and kind of handy. But that's what we plan on breaking down in this podcast is how we were able to do this, the struggles, the highs, the lows, the lessons, the skills and things we came away with as mother and father. And, what does your marriage look like before and during and after a build where we put so much of our normal life on hold? So we're going to lay it out all on the table. It's going to be a lot of fun. And this is sort of almost a scrapbook, like a memory piece for us to be able to just reminisce and talk about the highs and the lows of the last couple of years, and hopefully inspire and encourage some people. It's funny when we started, before I even, put up a single stud, my goal was like, I want to inspire other people to do the same thing. This is so cool. I would love if everybody did this. And 100% serious. Now I'm like, I need to warn people, because this is not warn people not to build their own house, but to try and do it all themselves with just, on a tight budget, with limited time. It's extremely difficult and extremely risky. And so I wouldn't recommend this to anyone the way that I did it. And so if you're curious about that, if you're curious about, doing a similar journey, then listen to the things that I would have done differently, because there's a handful of them. Well, that's my disclaimer.
I think it would also take a certain type of person to build it the way that you did, because, not everyone has certain skill sets or is handy in certain ways. You might have to subcontract out for more or less than we did. And I know that even just to get the ground going, you had to provide material that showed what you were capable of in order for us to even get a loan.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. So we're going to do about 4 episodes, 3 or 4, about 4 episodes, kind of on break this into stages. So 6 months at a time, 4 episodes covering the first 6 months, the next, etc. And we're going to be talking about the lessons and at a high level, kind of going through, sharing some photos. Um, and we won't get too technical, but at the end, I plan on doing an episode all about a financial breakdown. So I'll kind of get into the financing, who we went with through a loan, what we built through a pandemic. So costs went like record highs, like the most 2x4s ever cost. We paid for it.
So don't get disappointed if that's not integrated through the episodes. You may have to wait till the end to hear that, but know that we do have a purpose of going through or try to do chronological order for how the build went. And then, of course, we'll release some of those other specific details too at the last episode. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're live with us, thanks for joining us. There's a chat on the side. If you're on the website, mycomebacstory.com/house, there's a chat on the side. Feel free to pipe through any questions at any time, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you're listening to the audio after the fact, go to the website I just mentioned, and you can check out the video and see the photos. I've been moving away from social, so a lot of y'all been we're friends on Facebook. You've been following along in the house during the past few months. I went really quiet. Part of that was because we weren't supposed to be, and I hope the building inspector is listening, but we weren't supposed to be living in the house, and we were in it without a certificate of occupancy. So I really couldn't do any updates towards Christmas time, fall there. Anyways, I'm kind of moving away from social media, been on it less. And so the podcast and the email list is going to be where to get updates. So if you're interested, go to the website, subscribe to the email list. But we're going to go over the 2 years of a lot of crazy in just a few episodes. And so, yeah, we'll try to cover some ground. Why, I think before we get into how did we manage to pull this off, I think the biggest thing is why, like what was the goal? I know for me, when the research started, it was pretty naive. I had this idea that we could build a non-traditional home. I could do it all myself. I could do it with a kit, and we could do it for like 100 grand. 100 grand was like the nice round number I had in my head. And I quickly found out that wasn't feasible, but after I convinced my wife, so I sold her on that. I sold her on the vision of, hey, we can do this really affordably, and she was like, why? Well, I left out context. Where were we, when we decided to, when I was in the research phase?
So
with the Fallout House,
we were living in our first home, and the thought with our first home was that we wanted to have a little bit of equity in it. So the goal was to live in it for 5 years, but eventually was to sell it. And Brady is, already thinking about the next thing he wants to do. And it was, I can do a non-traditional home. And he's always looking for ways to do things that don't fit in the box of what the world wants you to do. And so, so we were living in our first home, and he sat me down and was just like, I really mean the thing I brought up the other day. Like, I think that we can do a non-traditional home, and here's why. And he explained to me how it would be cost effective in comparison to going out and buying a home or building a stick-built home. And I think that's probably a good place to start, is to talk about like the kit worldwide and talk about like where that inspiration of having that came into play, and then where you started, sketching up the blueprint.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I mean, I was going at this with a money mindset of like, I want more freedom, and, I want more freedom, which means I need to lower my mortgage. I want to be mortgage free. Obviously, we ended up, I'll just say it right now before we get to the financial breakdown episode, the goal was like 100K in the naive stage. Once I did my research, it was closer to like 150. Then when I actually realized, oh, the bank makes you get bids. Oh, for good reason, that you actually have to have this, mapped out and an actual budget. Imagine that. We were closer to the $200,000 mark. And then when it was all said and done, I think I get my numbers mixed up. We're somewhere between like 230 and 270, not including land. So all in all, 300 or just under 300,000, including land in the home,
and the things that we couldn't plan for are building in a pandemic, which, lumber costs
changed everything.
He'll go into that later, but sometimes maybe you'll get lucky and you'll build and you won't have those things come about. But we definitely had a rough go at some things financially because of where the economy was.
Yeah.
When we decided to finally build.
Yeah. So there was also a point where we were in the design stage and we're like, we're already spending this much money. The goal wasn't to build our dream home, but at a certain point, I was like, we're building it. We're going to put in all this time and energy and money. Why would we not spend a little bit more time and money and make it exactly how we want instead of compromising or giving up a few things? So we built it we're in a recording studio right now. It's not, the acoustics are terrible right now, but this will be the, fully functioning recording studio. And so we did some things like that. But anyways, back to the why. So in a nutshell, the research phase looked like me sitting down, literally going to Google and typing in non-traditional homes, cheapest homes to build, most efficient homes to build, and finding out all of the options. I looked at Adobe homes. I looked at ICF, which is like concrete forms with styrofoam. I looked at, we considered flipping again. It took us 5 years to flip our first house. I ended it with a massive skill saw injury that almost took out my whole hand. 5 surgeries, took over a year to recover. It was gnarly stage of our life. That just gives me chills thinking about it. But that was the end of our flip. And it was a 1950s house it was 1950s. And so crawl space and attic, I was tired of being in them. And I was like, I am done going in crawl spaces and attics with rat poop and stuff. And I don't want to sound super bougie, but I had just done a lot of that and it was gross. And I was just kind of over it. So I was like, well, if we can build new, why would we not build new instead of flip?
Yes. And your mindset is, how could I do this better, more efficient?
Right.
And I don't know if we actually answered the why that I was thinking you were going to answer, which was the reason that I believe you wanted to build a non-traditional home was for financial freedom to an extent.
Yeah.
And to be able to have the ability to go visit your family in Michigan. That was a big push for you. It's like, we're both working to pay this mortgage in a house that is in the 50s and we're constantly having to fix things that are broken or gut things out. And you said, I don't want to do that. The next home, I want to know what I'm up against. I want to build it.
So many mysteries with an old house. Like it's always a mystery. And it was like, if we stay here in this house, that was an option, or we flip again. I'm just tired of mysteries, which means unexpected financial surprises all the time. We paid $12,000, which was a bargain, literally a bargain, to terra firma to redo the foundation before we sold the house. So anyways, the research phase was essentially me landing on steel buildings, a couple specific companies. I got quotes from them. And the one we landed on was Worldwide Steel Buildings. They're the most honest.
Which we would recommend.
Yeah, I would 100% recommend them over and over. Called David Norton. He was my sales guy. Their company is fantastic, but Worldwide Steel Buildings has been around since the 80s, and they specialize in this type of hybrid building. It's steel trusses and columns with wood studs, and
they are
for residential.
Yeah, they're steel framed shells that are designed for residential. So they also do other commercial, but they have spent many, many years designing for those that want to use the shell as a residential. Yeah.
And just real quick, I'm not going to get technical right now, but a lot of people are curious about how did you finance a non-traditional build, a steel frame building? And then how did you get approval from like the county? Because I had people just tell me to my face, like, that's not gonna pass code. You're not, and the energy bill is cheaper than our last house from the 1950s. That was half the size. And so all of the things that I thought were going to be issues, like with the county and code and financing, were not issues at all. Like, were just not even issues. The real issues was like the time management and the stress and the communication and, subcontractors. We've got some stories. Anyways, we found Worldwide. We bought the kit, building kit. Basically, they engineer the outside, and then we, they sell you the kit for it was like 30 grand.
So
plus
we
our lumber.
chose a 30-foot by 50-foot.
Yeah,
is
30 by
correct?
50. Yep.
Shell designed by Worldwide for 30 grand.
Yeah. So some of you wondering, how did you do this? Oregon, you don't have to be a general contractor. You can be owner build, and that's fine. It's just, if you're using any subcontractors, they have to be licensed. But the building has to be designed, the house has to be designed by an architect. So in a nutshell, Worldwide Steel Buildings engineered gave me stamped engineered plans for the shell, and then we designed our floor plan 7 times over based off feedback, and took that to the county and said, here's what we want to build. And that was how it worked, and the county worked with us on the process. But yeah, so where was I going with that? The why? We found steel building kit, and then yeah. So the goal is to save money, and yeah. What else am I missing?
So after we decided to go with a Worldwide Steel Buildings shell, Brady downloaded a program.
The brochure. Oh.
For a 3D rendering of blueprints.
No. It wasn't even 3D. It was.
I have to share that because it's not like, we're not architects, and the shell was designed by engineers, but the blueprint was us downloading this program and putting it together. And so we did each room, and we spent hours thinking through where we're going to place it on our property, what made sense. We had to rework things over and over and over again, and talk as a couple about what was most important to us in a home.
Mm-hmm.
Rooms, we don't spend a lot of time in rooms, so smaller rooms for us were fine. We wanted to have a bigger gathering space because when we were in our first home, we hosted a small group, and it was life-changing. We just loved that season of our life, and we knew we wanted to do that with our new home and have people come in and leave feeling loved and comfortable. And so it just, we took time to design it. And then, because we know we're not architects, Brady had this connection across the street from his work, and he just would run in and say,
Tom Rogers Engineering,
can you just look at this and make sure I'm not gonna royally screw something
and
up?
He loved it because it wasn't just a standard spec house that he sees every day. It was something fun, interesting, and he was happy to help. And I almost feel guilty. I never paid him a dime. I was like, I feel like I should be paying you. I feel guilty, but he's right across the street downtown. I go ask some questions. And then for the floor plan, you guys are gonna laugh at how illegitimate this is. I used floorplanner.com. So if you're wondering, where did you get your plans? It does sound made up. I just went to Google and at floorplanner.com, and then I built a house. That's exactly how it went. But you're hitting on one of the most important things as far as how we did this. But I want to ask people real quick. This conversation can go 2 ways. I'm really itching to get into how we did it. What do we do beforehand to strengthen our marriage and, get in the right mindset? What do we do with money? How did I educate myself? How did I learn all this stuff? I'm itching to get into that. Well, we also want to talk about the build somewhat chronologically as far as like, buying the land, the design phase, which we're covering, excavation, getting the slab up. So let me know, do me a favor, drop a comment if you want to hear the how, or if you want to cover construction first, do how or construction in the comments if you're watching this. But while y'all are doing that, I think you're hitting on one of the most important things. How do we do this? A lot of couples that build homes, it nearly breaks their marriage. And some people, they end up building a house and get divorced. Like, and I'm just going off of the people that I talk to in everyday conversation, but it's like one of the most challenging things. And they're not even like, I don't mean this in bad, they're not building the house. They're having a general contractor build it. Maybe that's more stressful. I don't know. But it seems to be one of the hardest part is the decisions, like fighting over backsplash and paint colors and room size, and just it's unlimited options for 6 months to a couple of years.
There gets to be a point where there were many times where there's a decision that needed to be made. It needed to be made quickly. And there'd be a point where I'm like, I don't care. Whatever you want, as long as it's black. Like, that's where we were at. It's just, there comes to a point where you're like, I just want to get building. I just want to get past this phase or whatever. And so, yeah, it can be exhausting.
Yeah. So Vic, hey Matthew, Matt Hallman, what's up? Hey everybody. Sorry, the stream is like, I've had some technical issues with like getting the stream. So I'm looking at like 5 different windows right now, but I appreciate you all hopping on. It's really good to see some friends in the chat. Hey Chris, hey mom. Yeah, floorplanner.com. So Vic says, tell us how you prepared. Okay. Thanks, Vic. We'll dive into that. So what I was getting at is we sat down before any blueprints. I would 1000% recommend this to anyone looking at building a house, even if you're looking at buying a house, you're looking at remodeling your existing house, you're moving, whatever, sit down with your spouse and say, what matters? Because that will tell you what doesn't matter. And so if you keep the main thing, to us, what mattered was the the space to host a community group, small group, a lot of natural light. We didn't have a lot of windows in our house, and I get depressed easily. I was like, I want a ton of natural light. I don't care how much windows cost. We're gonna natural light. It was important that we had small closets.
I wanted a laundry room. It was like, we're going on our 11th year of marriage, and I've never had a laundry room. And I know it's the silliest thing, but I was like, I don't even mind if it's a small laundry room. I just want a room for it.
Yeah. And so, a laundry room and, obviously a studio has been a dream of mine since I went to school for recording, over about 10 years ago now.
Enough room for kids. Because
Yeah.
at the time we were also heading into adoption, and with embryo adoption, we knew we were going to have multiple kids. So we wanted to make sure that this was going to last. And so the discussion of how many rooms was a part of that too.
Yeah. And so we knew all of those things, and it allowed us to not be picky about, like, I say backsplash as the example because I think it's what, I don't know, in my head, that's like what people fight over is like what, but that's like the last priority for us. We got it off the clearance rack as like an afterthought.
Like, is this cool? Yeah.
But like paint colors, flooring choices, like a lot of that stuff, we decided in the beginning, we're not going to bicker over a lot of this, and it doesn't matter to us. We wanted small closets so that we wouldn't accumulate a bunch of crap. I had a big shop at our last house, so I said, I want a smaller garage, and every dude is going to be like, what's wrong with you? And that's exactly what happened. My brothers and every contractor that walked in here was like, why are you making your garage so small? I didn't want to have too many projects going on at once. And so anyways, we knew what mattered very clearly, and that allowed us to, I think we avoided so many fights and things because of that. Yeah, so we knew it mattered. So we'll talk about the other ways we, how we pulled this off, how we prepared, and then we'll talk about we'll show some photos in a few minutes here of some of the construction, the excavation, getting the slab up, the plumbing and all that.
How did we pick, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
How did we pick Dirty Duck excavation? How did we land on Chris? I can't even remember.
Dirty Duck, referral. It was word of mouth. Yeah. Okay. We'll talk more later about how to get good contractors and how to get terrible ones. what's 100% true for my situations is that word of mouth referrals were always the good ones, and the
Mhm.
ones I had to research and find on my own were the bad ones. Like
Mhm.
that's 100% true. So what else, before we talk about how we did it, what else did we do to
Oh,
prepare? Like,
okay. This is a big one. So Brady has a rule of 3, and he does this for books that he reads and um,
lots
I
of
don't know,
things.
picking contractors or whatever. And so that's where I think my thought process was going with Chris and Dirty Duck, is that we had 3 people come out and look at our property for excavation and give us bids before we decided, okay, this is the one we're going to land on and go with. And um, it was a no-brainer for me. I was like, Chris all the way, because he came and he not only loved to play in the dirt, which you want when
He said
somebody's
that 10
going
times.
to
I just like to play in the dirt.
excavate, but also he was a visionary. And so for me, that was the selling point on who we went with, because he was able to uh, hear us and what we wanted, look at our property, and be able to see how he could help us accomplish the things that we wanted between each other, with the land that we had. And we didn't have an easy land to develop or excavate.
It's 0.45 acres, so it's almost a half acre, but it's on a
But it's
slope.
all sloped. And when we
It's
came
skinny.
up on this land, it was just a skinny, flat part, and then not even room to put a home on. So the excavating piece was like
It was
our
crucial.
first start, and it was crucial.
And it was before, sorry, I mean, interrupt you. I
No,
wanted
you're
people to
fine.
know that it was before we designed the house.
Mhm.
We bought the land a few months before we wrapped our heads around what we want to do. I think probably even before I was 100% set on steel building.
Mhm.
And then we said, okay, we have this skinny kind of weird lot. It's going to be really expensive to take dirt away or add dirt in and fill, and it'd be too cost prohibitive to do any of that. So what can we fit here?
So our first challenge was, how do we even build on the land that we got? We got it for the view. I am someone who has vision, and so I was like, if somebody is able to make this lot work for our home, then it's going to be beautiful. And Chris with Dirty Duck made that happen. Um, it also, because of the land that we wound up getting, changed our mindset when we went to design the home, because Brady, I think, always kind of leaned toward one level.
I wanted a ranch home. That was my
Yeah.
dream home would
But
really
we
be
couldn't. We
like
had
this
to
on
go.
one level.
We had to go up because we couldn't spread out with the house.
And I thought building up would be building up versus building out. You can research that for days, but sometimes it is cheaper. In our case, I think it was probably a wash or about the same. But anyways.
We also need to mention that because it was a non-traditional home steel frame, we had to pick a lot that had no, or was an HOA. What are the?
Oh yeah, it was incredibly difficult to find a piece of land that had no HOA and no CCNR. So no
CCNR. That was the other.
covenants, creed, and I was going to say regulations. Regulations. Basically, the freedom to build what we wanted to build, and so.
Yeah. So make sure you check those things if you are going to do a non-traditional build versus a stick-built home.
Check it with a fine tooth comb. Very, very quick sidebar. We had our first chunk of drama was after we started framing the house, and we had the guy who sold us the lot freak out and like, what are you doing? What are you building? And I'm like, well, we're steel frame home. It's going to have steel siding. It's going to look like a house when we're done. But I understand right now it looks like a shop. And we had a few people that got kind of upset off the bat because they didn't know the vision. They didn't see the blueprints. They didn't understand what it was. And there was this ordeal about our lot was supposed to be as a part of CCNRs or HOA, and it wasn't. So somebody dropped the ball on paperwork, not during our transaction, but when the lot was whatever you do with the
So
county.
if we had not made sure that we were able to build up here,
That would have screwed us.
we would have been in a really bad spot.
Oops.
So yeah, and when you're putting up a steel frame, just the frame of it, and it's a rectangle, it looks like you're just building a huge shop at the top of the hill, and neighbors are like, what? Because they could not see the vision of our beautiful white house with black roof and
Yeah.
all the landscape and all the vision that we have for the beauty of our home. Just getting started, all it was metal beams on a concrete slab in the shape of a rectangle.
So
yeah.
I'm gonna bounce around a little bit here, but Vic, you had asked like how we prepared for it. So we talked about the design phase. That's pretty much all I want to cover there. But as far as one other note on expectations, when we went into this, I thought 6 months to a year, and it's been about 2 years since I was like finalizing, designs and all that. So thought it was going to be a year, thought it was going to cost, 150-ish, and pretty much the timeline of the money, a lot of those things doubled. Also just because we were building in a pandemic, that changed a lot of things. But there were a few really intentional things that we did before we started building the house that I'm so thankful we did. So we made sure that we were on the same page with the house, with the design. I love what our old pastor, Steve Walker, used to say, high expectations, low sense of adventure. No. Oh, I botch it every time. Low expectations, high sense of adventure. So low expectations, high sense of adventure. We were on the same page. We had a strong marriage going into it. Full honesty, transparency between each other. We loved each other. We were in a healthy spot. If we went into this not in a healthy spot, I don't think we would have survived. I don't think our marriage would have survived.
We also intentionally met with a marriage counselor and friend that we've had because we knew we were about to take on a lot with embryo adoption and donation and building the home. And we wanted to make sure that we had, lifelines or anchors, whatever you want to call it, just something that was a solid foundation before we went into some really crazy audacious things that we were about to.
Like it wasn't a surprise. It was like we were intentionally going into the hardest couple of years of our entire marriage, and we knew it. And so I started meeting with a friend counselor locally, probably met every 2 or 3 weeks for 2 or 3 months, over the summer. And then, for the last couple sessions, Sloan and I both got on with them. And so we did some counseling. I started a new Bible study with some friends around that time, right when we started building. I have a mentor. Sloan's dad is my personal mentor. So we were meeting regularly at the time, which kind of went on pause during the house build, which I'm, regretful of that. But anyways.
And I have a mentor as well. And
I
meet with her regularly. Not as much lately with the baby, but we set in place that we had some go-to people to encourage us, that we could call if we needed to, and that could give us perspective on ourselves or how we were seeing things, and just pray for us through the process, knowing that we felt this call to grow our family and grow the space that our family was about to come into.
Yeah, we needed people to encourage us. We needed people to go to when the drywall contractor runs off with your money, to go to them and say, how does Jesus handle this? Like, how should I be handling this? I'm so angry. Like when stuff really hits the fan, you need those people to go to. So we put those relationships intentionally in our life before we began. Let's see. We talked about relationships, mentors, design.
While we're on that too, just a quick, I feel like uh, maybe at the time when we were setting that up, we didn't know that it would be needed, but later on, it was so needed when I was pregnant and then could no longer help Brady. And so Brady needed to have um, men that he could go to, that he could trust their wisdom and advice and be able to lean into the Lord. And I needed to be able to press in, knowing that Brady was not going to be able to necessarily like make every baby appointment and things like that. And that I might have to take on some of the just carrying our child stuff, um, with the support of my family and my mentor. And so it was like we sort of had our roles. And even though we worked hard to be what each other needed, there were limitations in that because of my physical stuff and his time with working full time and still having to make deadlines on the house. And so being able to put in those anchors before we started uh, wound up saving us at the finish line.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, what I was thinking about as you're talking is, how we were able to pull this off, because sometimes I forget like the depth of like, this podcast is about the house, but we were doing the whole adoption process at the same time, and I remember you and I having a hard conversation right before we started building the house. I think we had just bought the land, and we were talking about the calling on our hearts to go after adoption, and we were both bought in and believed in that, but I was not in agreement on the timeline. I was like, I don't want to adopt and build a house at the same time. Let's let's build a house first because it'll be quick, is what I thought, and then we'll adopt. And she had to really convince me, pull me in, and not even convince, but I got to this point of like, okay, let's do it. Like, I just have to trust God that this is going to work out. I have no idea how this is going to go. This is probably a bad idea. But we're going to adopt and build a house at the same time. And actually, the other part of the story that I left out was I wanted to, change my career path. So I went to my boss, Trevor, and said like, hey, I want to do this podcast, this thing I'm passionate about, full time. And I would like to slowly transition out of care. I thought I was going to change careers at the same time. And I made steps to. And then I, thank goodness, I had mentors. This is the importance of mentors in my life that said, hey, maybe pump the brakes. Maybe don't change your job at the same time as these other things. And
also, it's really good, women, if you know your husband's mentors.
Yeah.
And you can, pray that they're going to, press into the places in your husband that are going to help him and guide him to what's going to be best for your family. I can tell you that through a house build and adoption, I have become a praying woman.
Yeah. So, as far as how we did it, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the other things that enabled us to pull this off, both from, I want to cover the heart and the heart and the mind, and then the tactical as well. But I think the heart and the mind are the most important ones. And then we'll share some photos of the build. But the number one thing how I was able to pull this off was God's strength. Like, I don't mean that in a cheesy way. If you're not a Christian, we don't share the same beliefs, then I don't know how to communicate this in a different way. I'm not saying this with any agenda, but there were multiple points in the build where I was out of strength. And I remember the first time I hit a wall was December. So we were a few months in. So then I were framing it inside. And I text Tim, my father-in-law, my mentor, and said, hey, can you come meet me at the house? I said, I'm struggling. And I was falling apart. I was like depleted. And we're only 6 months in. And little did I know we had a year and a half to go. In my head, I thought we were halfway done. And I was burnt out. And basically his message to me was two things. It was, one, you're building the house and building your family is not separate. it's not these two separate things where you build your house and then you have some family time. Like, it all comes from the heart. All of these things come from the heart. And so it really kind of broke my brain just thinking about, like, oh, I still have to make time for my family, even though I have a bank and a county, really a bank on my back saying this house needs to be done in 12 months. And that's it. So there's this like intense financial pressure. Meanwhile, material cost is going through the roof and it's getting more expensive by the day. And the longer we take, the more expensive it gets. And it just keeps compounding, causing this insane amount of stress. And the longer we're doing it, the weaker I feel because we're just building forever. Anyways, I hit that point where the other thing Tim was getting at was like, when are you going to tap into God's strength and stop trying to do this on your own? And so that was the first time I said, okay, I can't do this on my own. I need to trust God in specific things and stop trying to figure them out myself. And we'll give stories and examples of that through these episodes. But I think my biggest regret with the house build was not trusting more and not trusting sooner. And I was trying to rely on all my own gusto, my own energy, and from day one of building the house. And actually, I was really consistent in my reading scripture, reading the Bible, and prayer up until the week my dad and my brother got here to help me start put up the skeleton of the house. And that is when I got out of habit and went out of balance for the next year and a half. And so that's probably the biggest regret. And looking back, it's so counterintuitive. But if I had taken more time to put God first and be filled with that strength, I think it would have been maybe a less stressful, more pleasurable experience. There were a lot of good times, but anyways, that's the biggest takeaway is that, like, if you want to do something this crazy, I don't know. I can give you all the technical tips in the world, but if your spirit is not full and you don't have purpose and you don't have a God to guide you and mentors in your life, then I can't give you any other advice. Like, that's my biggest takeaway from the whole thing.
Yeah. Thanks for being real. It made me think about, just there were moments probably around that time specifically. It might have actually lined up in the time when, the neighbors were upset for what we had started building. And you had said, like, I think I'm going to have to give up. I think we're going to have to sell the property. And like this, skeleton of, like, we just had steel beams up and some, purlins. And you're like, all right, like, we might just have to call it quits. Like, I don't see a way forward. And I remember that there were
that was after the roof. That was the first
Okay.
panic attack in the series of
That's right.
I probably had about, and I'm not being over dramatic. This build caused me to have probably 4 to 7 like legitimate panic attacks, physical, like all in.
And as a wife, it's, you're going, okay, so I put my eggs in this basket and we committed to this thing and we're this far in. And you start thinking about all of the aftermath that's going to happen if your husband backs out. And so there's,
to me,
a lot of encouragement, and there were a lot of talks of honestly needing to build Brady up and say and tell him, this was not a crazy idea. You are capable of doing this with the Lord. I know that it feels exhausting and seems impossible. But we can do this. And there were times where I didn't even see how we were going to do it. I didn't. But being an encourager and showing up, and every time Brady came out to the lot to work on something, I was here. So there is not a time that I wasn't here when we hit the ground running. And we'd be out here until 11. Well, we'd stop working at 10 for noise ordinance, and then sometimes work on things that were quiet. But I'd be here, and even if it was just to hand tools or wait around until Brady said, "Can you grab this thing?" or "Can you hold the end of this measuring
Or just
tape?"
to know that I wasn't working alone. I mean, especially towards the last 6 months to a year, it was like,
Yeah.
I doubt you would be of much physical assistance, but it'd be awesome to just have you around.
Yeah.
I'm done, like tired of working alone.
So as a couple building our home, like part of the realness of what that looked like was I was here, I was present for it all. I wasn't at home just chilling. Atticus was here, playing in the dirt, and I was talking through problem solving with Brady as he's building or framing, and something doesn't make sense, like a wall that we put in our blueprint, and we're not architects, and it doesn't fit in the home. And then it's just
So
like
many things in the blueprints or in the plans that it worked on paper and then it didn't work when we actually tried to frame it up.
or trenching, and I'm
Oh man,
5'2" and it's as tall as me, and I can't, actually do anything
in the
much.
trenches. That'll be a good episode.
Yeah,
In the
but
literal trenches.
anyways, I guess the point I'm trying to make, because I can be long-winded, is just that if you decide to build a home together, it's together. And we, sometimes the best I could do is just show up.
Mhm.
And that was enough.
And this is all within the context of like with with a bank, with a construction loan on our backs. I say that because that's how it felt to me the whole time. And we're still just about to close up the loan. But anyways, with a timeline and budget restrictions, if you're doing this with cash on your own timeline, codes.
Up to code.
To code. Yeah. If you're doing this, like the opposite.
We'd be building something,
Yeah.
and then come to find we thought we were doing it up to code, but then there's this tricky other underlying thing.
I mean, everybody's got code, but West Coast code, for my Michigan family and, friends in the Midwest, it's like West Coast code is so much more specific. There's way more inspections. I mean, you have national codes, but it's just, there's a lot of things, and there's way more frequent inspections, which is probably a good thing.
Our first inspection was plumbing, and we failed that inspection.
But the opposite of this, I don't want to discourage people from building your own home. If you're in Kentucky and you have, more cash on hand and you can take your time, then awesome, go for it. That was one thing I left out about the prep, by the way. It was like, how did we, financially, how do we swing this? Essentially, we flipped our last house, while we lived in it over the course of 4 or 5 years. We sold it, let's see, we bought it for 140, sold it for like 240, after realtor fees and the money we put in foundation, we walked away with like 70 grand. So we were able to buy the lot with cash. So we bought the lot with cash, and then had some, and then had some money for cash flow for construction, because the construction loan is based off reimbursement. But that's the technical of like how we were able to pull this off. We 4 years of sweat equity before we put in a couple more years of sweat equity.
Also, we did pass our plumbing inspection the second time.
we did pass it. So one other thing, so we're talking about like how do we pull this off? I think one of the things I want to mention is I don't know if it's hard-headedness or stubbornness, but mom and dad, I think you guys are watching, but this resilience that runs in both of our families.
Brady and I are both stubborn, and we're both resilient.
And I say this like I'm eternally grateful for this. I didn't do anything to deserve it. I didn't ask to be raised in this household. But I also believe that this can be taught, and it can be learned, and it can, resilience can be, you can you can get better at it and you can become more resilient over time. So even if you're raised a certain way or you have a certain negative mindset, I don't believe it's just static and that's the way your life always is. You
Yeah,
can
I
make
am a
improvements.
testimony of that because I married this very ambitious risk taker, and I am someone that plans and organizes and doesn't really take a leap unless I know that everything's calculated and is going to work out. And so being hitched to this one is, it's caused me to risk more. And in that, I have found that I am capable of so much more than I think that I am, and at the
Yeah.
time. And that that resilience builds because you are kind of forced into that. But
Yeah.
it's as much as it is scary at times, it's also freeing.
Yeah. And for me, it means like my dad was pararescue in the Air Force for 30 years. And so their motto is never quit, we ought to never quit. And I heard that a million times growing up and I saw it in action. And we had a lot of challenges growing up of moving all over and our life was a little bit, crazy. I think crazy in a good way, but there was just this theme of like this unrelenting will to never give up on the things you were doing. And that bled over into the house build. And I don't mean as a whole, like, oh, I can't stop building this house. Cause there were times when I wanted to just sell the land and just like cut my losses. But in specific situations, even like financing, I made probably, I don't know, 50 phone calls to mortgage lenders and private lenders and talked to wealthy business owners that I know, people way smarter than me, and was like, how do I do this? And I had career bankers tell me, you're never going to get a loan for that. Doesn't exist. Too high risk. Owner build,
Don't
you're not going to get a
ever
loan.
tell Brady
And I
that.
had so many people tell me no. And I'm like, no, I've seen it done. You don't. So this
He was like, "I wanna
extreme
prove you
stubbornness
wrong."
where it's borderline, like maybe I should have stopped and listened if this many people said no. But something in me, this little itch, this little burn was like, no, that I can do this, or like, not I can do this, but I can be resourceful and creative enough. I think I'm very creative and I'm able to, know what questions to ask and who to ask and where to go. But I think that's only part of the equation. I think a lot of it's just like, okay, if somebody said no, I'm just going to call the next person on Google, or I'm going to reach out to a different type of person and just go a million different ways until somebody gives me a yes. And that's exactly that's how the financing went until I landed at the bank that we went with, which was Banner Bank. But anyways, just that resilience was, I think, how we pulled it off. You got to have that. Kelsey Sirocco had asked before we started the podcast, what gave you the confidence? And I've had other people like, how do you think you can do that? Here's the truth. Here's the full truth. If I had an accurate expectation of how long this would take and how difficult it would be, I would not have had the confidence. And so there's this, I think probably the second biggest lesson for me was that like unrealistic expectations can be wildly dangerous and like unchecked. My friend Seth Beckley, I was in a Bible study with during these couple of years. He has a book on ambition, and it's all about the dangers of like unthrottled ambition, unchecked ambition. And that was me during this build. And I knew in the back of my head when I was in the planning phase, I knew there were some risky things. This might take longer. It's going to be more difficult, especially when we decided 2-story and make it taller, make it taller. There were going to be some things that in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, I'm just not going to worry about that. I'm not going to face that. And just had unrealistic expectations going in. So anyways, what I was getting at is I don't think I would have had the confidence if I had an accurate picture. But at the same time, I think, I was just raised with this mindset of like, when you do something, you put your heart and soul into it and make something that matters.
I think that I can also see when there's something that you are capable of doing up against the ambition or just the dream or the inspiration, and being able to look at those things and say, okay, this is what Brady's capable of. This is where he's inspired. Can these things go together?
Right.
And so I knew that this was something that you could do. I knew that.
Yeah.
But I also knew that it was going to have challenges and places that would be hard on your mental and that we would need to have people to help. Also, I know this is sort of a man thing. I'm going to share this, but and I was okay.
A man thing. Well, you gotta be nervous. A man thing.
They don't always like to ask for help, but there are times where a
Yeah.
man needs to lean he needs to know he can do it. And there are times I could see Brady needed to know that he could do something. And maybe even times where he had a timeline or something that needed to be done and he was capable of it, but he was exhausted and burning the midnight oil at work and building home. And so the only way he was going to see that through is by that piece he had mentioned earlier and leaning into God's strength. And I knew he needed to do that. But then I can also recognize at times that, nope, he just needs help. He just needs support. He needs people to show up for him. And so there were times where I was like, all right, I think that you need some help. I know you can do this, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should do this by yourself.
And that was the biggest lesson I learned from, my skill saw accident where I almost lost my hand, was learning to ask for help, because I would almost never ask for help on anything. I didn't like to. I felt like I was inconveniencing people. Maybe it was a pride issue. It didn't feel like a pride issue. Probably is. Somebody wiser than me could probably tell me. But I didn't like asking for help. I love the satisfaction of being able to say, oh, look what I did. Look what, how cool is that? It feels so satisfying. And I had to, and it's embarrassing to say, but I had to relearn that in some instances with the house. It's like, it's not cool to just say, look what I did. What I've learned from the house is that something even more satisfying, something really beautiful can happen when you say, look what we did. And look at these really creative people I pulled in my life that saw the vision and added to my vision. People like Chris.
Where I was going with that too is that, you can, because God created all kinds of different people. You could be more of like a brain type where you have these brilliant ideas and things, but maybe you're missing heart, and maybe somebody else brings that into the mix. And because, God, there's a body of Christ and there's people with all these different gifts. When those all come together, something really awesome happens. And so there were definitely times where I would say, like, hey, I think we're at a place where you could benefit from some people coming in. Can I reach out? And he'd say, okay. And so I'd reach out, and we'd have like Gabe from Woodgrains came out, and there was a really weird spot we needed to tackle with framing over some ducting. And we're like, how the heck is this gonna look aesthetically correct and function well? And he was like, took Brady's like really overcomplicated thing and was like, now let's do this. And Brady was like, oh my goodness, like I way overcomplicated that. I couldn't even see that. And those helped, other people helped us achieve some really awesome parts.
Well, it was like so frustrating and such a relief at the same time when I would spend days, literally like multiple evenings after work, racking my brain around like, how do I do this thing? And how do I, And a lot of times it didn't even matter. Like, how do I fulfill this one part? How do I build this wall to where it meets this code? And then, I have a contractor or a friend come by and they just say, well, that doesn't matter because they have more experience than I do, or they're able to figure it out in like 10 times the amount of time. And so if I could do it different, like people ask, what would you do differently?
10 times
would you do it again?
That's what I meant.
Theoretically, I would have saved more money so I could sub more things out and pick really like awesome subcontractors, and maybe do 25% less work. But that's theoretical because I didn't have the time to make that money and I didn't have that extra money. So it doesn't really matter. But if you're looking at doing this, I would, make sure that you have, 25, 35% more than you think you need to hire out those subs. But that's what I would do differently. Mom says, we don't say I can't. I can't was not allowed. We weren't allowed to say that growing up. And if you're listening to this and you have kids and, I would just encourage you, like, that's an opportunity. You can raise your kids to, Atticus is not allowed to say I can't. Allison said, short answer, child labor. He did some work. It's not child labor if you don't pay them, right? Just kidding. Atticus did it. Atticus was an amazing helper, but we weren't, he wasn't at an age where he's like, oh, get on the roof, help me frame this wall. There wasn't that. But he was a great helper.
And Brady said he would hire me as a contractor assistant over a lot of contractor assistants.
So a couple other things, and how we did this at the high level, and then we'll wrap it up by talking about the getting the skeleton up, Bryce and Dad coming out, and getting the steel frame up.
Did you say Bryce? You meant
or
Brogan.
Brogan and Dad coming out, and then talk about the slab and the staying up till 1, 2 in the morning installing PEX pipe for radiant heat before contractors showed up. We'll touch on that, but a couple more tactile things. So education, like, how did you learn this? How did you have the skills to do this? I didn't. I come from a woodworking background. I, did woodworking as a hobby. And I mean, like, on a small scale compared to other legitimate woodworkers or people you watch on YouTube. I was a very part-time hobbyist woodworker. And then I worked for 2 different cabinet shops, which gave me some more experience, but really not a lot. I wasn't even really doing much installing. So pretty minimal. I actually got fired from the second cabinet shop because I wasn't a good fit. And I wasn't in like the churn and burn, get the job out the door. That wasn't my, like, I didn't want to slam cabinets together. Anyways, that could be a thing in its own, but we won't make it that. So I don't
multi-focused.
Yeah.
And
so
they wanted you to be focused.
I was also unmedicated at the time. My ADHD was like all over the place. Anyways, so I don't have a construction background, never framed anymore. That was one of the big struggles, was like learning tolerances and what you can and can't get away with. I thought everything had to be perfect. But then when you're framing, if it's off by 1/8 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch off when you're a woodworker is like, throw the thing in the garbage and, don't tell anyone. As a framer, you're like, sweet. Anyways, the education piece is 2 parts. 1, YouTube University, 2, contractors. So let me break this down. I made a list of everything I knew I would need to do on the house. And I watched YouTube videos on how to do that thing at a high level, general at first, and then some of the more specific things. So one of the things I learned from my friend Trevor Mock, is just in case learning versus just in time learning. So I learned a lot, watched a lot of YouTube videos before we built the house, but not too much. And I didn't want to overwhelm myself. So before we got to that phase of construction, in the evenings, after sound ordinance, like I get off work, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, go work until 10 because that's sound ordinance. I can't use a nail gun anymore. And then I'd watch YouTube to wind down
and have his wife watch it too.
Hey, can you watch this for me? Tell me how to do this. So a lot of YouTube.
When I would go out with you, I would know what we were doing.
So what this looks like is like it really matters how you search. And when you're living at a time, like, you can't just watch every YouTube video out there. So framing, I'd watch a video like how to frame a house. And then I would watch top 10 or like top most common mistakes when framing a house, and framing hacks.
What resources you use, because there can be some bad ones out there where we wouldn't want somebody like just looking up,
So
Yeah. Do you have like
There's,
specific ones
I
you
do. There's
use?
specific ones. So
Okay.
the more important thing is that you search specifically and don't waste your time, because there's a lot of general just garbage crap videos on YouTube. But the most common mistakes ones were the most helpful, because those are the ones you find where, oh, this is what people on the street will tell you, and it's not actually up to code. So I would watch mistake videos. And then, top tips. The first YouTube channel, that was probably the most helpful was Essential Craftsman, Scott. And so I've had the blessing, the pleasure of working with Scott, for a few months now. But Essential Craftsman, he's got very specific videos on like framing pro tips and skill saw pro tips, more general construction. So Essential Craftsman. The most influential one was Marshall Remodel. So if you look up Marshall Remodel, I can't remember the name of the series he did, but he built his own home with cash with his wife, in the Midwest, and it's a steel building, white siding, black trim, very similar to ours, but our build was largely inspired by the things he did, even specific construction design details I picked up from him. He did a video on every little thing, and I watched, he was just very in depth. So if you're interested in a steel frame building or pole barn build, two separate things. But anyways, Marshall Remodel. And then RR Buildings. RR Buildings was he's a steel building guy. Barn dominiums are all the rage right now, I guess, depending on who you talk to. What we built is a barn dominium. I mean, it is, but most people build them like to have a giant shop inside, or like a barn. But I don't know, it's not really your typical barn dominium. But RR Buildings is super helpful for that. And then the last one, more so in the last 6 months, the year of the project, when we got into like drywall and finish stage, and like plumbing before drywall, Home Renovision DIY. It's a Canadian guy in a blue polo, and just really helpful. Like, he has a video called Drywall A to Z, and it's like an hour and 20 minutes long, and he breaks down like everything you would need to know. So Home Renovision DIY. I've watched a lot of YouTube channels, and those have been the most helpful. There's another one, Tile Coach. If you guys are wanting to remodel a bathroom, look up Tile Coach. And then one that's okay is like Stud Pack. I don't like their attitude and just like the way they present themselves, but they're good. They're smart. They know their stuff. Those specific YouTube channels, I watched almost every video. All of them have. Yeah. And then, okay, so what I was getting at is the education piece. So YouTube University, that's half the equation. But then contractors. So it's like, well, you built your own house. What do you mean contractors? Well, here's how I did this. I had never ran electrical in my life. I didn't even know what Romex was. I don't know what 12.2, 14.2, 14.3 was. I don't know anything about electrical. It scared the crap out of me. I was like, I don't want to touch it. It was so mysterious. And now I'm comfortable with it. Like, I can go to the panel and shut off breakers, and I could rewire, parts of my house. But it wasn't that way. So I did a little bit of YouTube, but even on YouTube, I was like, I'm still overwhelmed. So what I did is I called 3 contractors. I called 3 electricians, and I said, here's what I'm doing. I said, I'm building my own home, and I'm looking for someone that is willing to, that wants to work with me. And no, actually, cut that. I called and said, hey, can I get a bid? Like, what would it cost for you to do the whole house? Just because I was curious. I wanted some context. And then I asked, okay, what would it look like if I did half of it or part of it? And really, when you start having those conversations, contractors are like, we don't really, like, most contractors just aren't interested in doing part of a job. Like, in general, most contractors don't want to do it. So I tried to find the contractors who would work with me and educate me. That was the main thing. So Caleb Otis, Kara, I think you guys are watching. Let me look at the comments. Yeah, Kara and Caleb are watching right now. So Caleb is like the example of like one of the best contractors and one of the best to work with. So Caleb said, I can't really give you a bid because your house is ginormous and it's custom, and there's like, you don't have a plan. I didn't have a construction plan. I didn't realize like how unhelpful that was. And so he's like, we can do time materials. I think he gave me some ballparks. But anyways, I said, Caleb, he said, what do you want from me? Like, I can do your whole house, or you can do your whole house. I said, I want you to educate me. I said, I want you to, before you do something, teach me, draw it out for me, show how it works. And then I will be the monkey. I will do all the grunt labor and then I'll work on it. And then when I get stuck, can I call you or have you come in? And so that's exactly how that went, like electrical specifically. So as I mentioned, Oregon is a owner build state, and so you don't have to have a general contractor's license, but your subs have to be licensed. My name is on all the permits. I'm doing, I'm wiring up the panel, I'm running the Romex, I'm hooking things up, and so there's no legal issue there. Anyways, I'm basically paying Caleb to educate me and say, how do I do this? And he would draw the diagrams on the wall. I'd run the wire, and that's how it worked. Same thing when it came to plumbing. I did have someone else do all the drains in the house, but I wanted them to educate me and design it because I don't know how to design a plumbing system up to code or efficiently nonetheless. I thought I did, but after watching the YouTube videos, but there were some mistakes I would have made. So I paid
And we did do the
radiant heat.
Well, yes, but we did the, is it underground plumbing? Is that what you would say?
Oh yeah.
And we didn't pass inspection on that, and then realized that I think it was the glue we used. It was something really
we used the wrong glue. It was so dumb. Like
in one section, and so we redid a whole section, pulled it all out, redid it, and then they came back past us. And you're just like, I don't love plumbing. I think that this is not something I want to tackle for the rest of our house.
Yeah.
And then that was where you're like, okay, we're going to hire somebody to come in and do the finished plumbing.
Yeah, because originally I was going to do all of the plumbing.
That was in it. And I was like, you did not enjoy that. Like that was a headache for you to do. So then that's where you sit at the drawing board and go, okay, is this something we can afford to subcontract out? And for us, it was. So that was one piece.
Yeah, it was in the early stages. There hit a point where like we were paying for things that we couldn't afford and didn't. Yeah.
Well, in many parts of this build, yes. Yeah. But it was definitely something where we're like, this will benefit us as far as how this is going to function in our home to have somebody else do it, because it's just not really your craft or I mean, you can do it, but you're not a professional at it. And so it was worth it to us to have somebody else do that.
Yeah. And so I think paying contractors to have them educate you and just I like the, I didn't really work with any big outfits, any big operations. I like the one-man crews who you can, call them or text them and say, hey, I got a quick question. I don't like calling a front office.
That was another part in when we were selecting contractors too, was if they picked up their phone.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of them that just wouldn't get back to us and kind of were like, oh, we will get back to you within this time frame. And it just... and we're like,
yeah, I got a whole list of how not to hire a contractor and, what things were super helpful. I'll cover that probably in a couple episodes when we get to the drywall and the roof story. But, anyways, yeah, I'll go into that because I know every friend and every person I talk to, I feel like has a contractor horror story right now, or at least everybody I know that's doing working with contractors. It's tough right now.
We also have great ones too.
We did. We had some really great ones. One of them was just here today. So the last couple things I want to touch on, creativity, as far as how we pulled this off, and then we'll talk about the slab and getting the skeleton up, and then we'll wrap it. Creativity and relationships, we pretty much covered that, but just I think what I mean by that is knowing, I think being able to see what motivates someone and find the people that want to be a part of your vision. And Chris, the excavator, he had an amazing vision for this property that I didn't even see. And so choosing him because he had the vision and not just because of the price point. He coincidentally ended up being the most affordable, and that was amazing. That was a bonus. But really finding out how people tick, why they do the work that they do makes all the difference. Caleb, enjoys being an electrician. He likes the craft.
All of our great contractors are people who love doing what they all our great contractors are people who love doing what they do.
Yeah. And so the other thing I mean by that is like skill trading. Any skill trading you're able to do with people. And then when I say creativity and relationships, I mean like there's a point where you can no longer, like, I burn out my friends by asking for help. Like I can't ask for help so many times. And so I think just knowing which friends to call on. The bad way to go about asking for help, whether you're building a house or not, is like, hey, who's available, who wants to help come with this thing. But think about like, who would really love to help me with this, or who would
specific.
Yeah. So who has the technical abilities or skills, and who would just love to help me with this? And so, hey, I know this friend has done a house remodel before, so he likes doing plumbing or baseboards or whatever, and he would probably have some fun. So when I was going through the list of friends in my head, it's like, who would have fun with this? Who would enjoy this, and who would, or at a minimum, like who wouldn't mind coming over to help me?
But there's always those places of like, you get to insulation and nobody is going
if you're
to
insulating
love
a
it.
house, nobody's going to help you. Pretty much nobody. Seth Bueckley, thank you. Tim, thank you. Am I leaving anyone out?
Yeah, if you beat lung cancer and you come out and help us with insulation, you are a hero in my book.
There's just some things you should not ask your friends for help, and I didn't ask anyone for. I mean, not many people for help with insulation. It's just
my dad, we didn't really ask. He just kept showing up.
Anyways, so that's what I mean when I'm talking about creativity and relationships. The other one is creativity in money. So Sloan and I came up with this dorky little phrase a couple years ago. I don't know what we were doing, but I was like looking at something that I felt was overpriced, and I was like, I'm not a sucker. Why would I pay that much? And so somewhere a few years ago, I started saying sucker free. Like, I don't mean that everyone who doesn't bargain shop like me, because I'm just like cheap and frugal, I don't mean that those people are suckers. I mean, I don't want to be suckered into paying more than I have to for something. If I can afford to get it cheaper. So that's just, I don't know. I was raised frugally. Anyways, so sucker free, creativity with your finances. So example of this, we got all of the appliances for our house at Lowe's, open box, either open box or they had a dent on them and they returned them. And I don't mean just like regular open box. I mean, every time I went to Lowe's, I would make a habit of going down the back aisle and, checking to see what appliances were there and what sales they had. And so like religiously going to Lowe's to see what was on sale. What else? What were the other sucker free things?
You know how when you're shopping and you're looking for something specific, it's really hard to find. But then when you're not looking for it, you just happen to find it. I told me.
Oh, okay.
Or do you want to wait?
Oh, okay.
Anyways, so that's kind of how we went about finding our appliances at Lowe's, is that it was, we knew they had a open box or returns and had this section of discounts. And so just every time we were there, we would check on it and just piece together each thing we needed. So we're like, we'd show up and they'd have refrigerators, and there would be ones that would be like half the price and stainless steel, and we would get one. And then, maybe the next time we go, it was a microwave or a stove or something.
Yeah.
But so we just would always, and sometimes we'd go and find nothing, and that was fine. But we would always check that, and we got all of our appliances for like half of what.
Oh, no, half at the minimum. Some of them,
than half.
We got what was the?
We saved all the receipts. We are going to make a book out of it.
We got a dishwasher for $400. That was $1,200. We got a double wall oven, like a wall mount double oven. That was $2,900 new. We got it for $850.
I'm like, what?
We got our fridge for $400. So like, as we're doing this in the middle of supply chain issues, in the middle of a pandemic, I have friends like, I bought my appliance package. I spent 4 or 5 grand and it's delayed 6 months. And I'm like, oh, sorry. I got
Like,
all
I
mine
don't
are still in the
know that
garage.
world.
Anyways,
Yeah.
so that's kind of how we treated the whole build. Like what's on.
I guess it was hard to like have a place to store all of those things because
Yeah.
it wasn't like right when we're ready to install them in the home.
Yeah.
But it was financially affordable, amazing
Yeah.
for us.
We saved a lot of
to
money.
do that
Yeah.
way.
And we saved a lot of money by doing those things. We didn't like our overall budget didn't go down because of that. It was offset by supply chain issues and just cost of materials went through the roof. And so it was offset by that, but it kept us from like really breaking the bank. Dad said, explain skill trading. I'll do that. And then we'll hop into like, some of the technical stories.
Something else that I just want to say while we're on that in my mind is that I also tried to keep in mind like things that can be replaced or changed. I didn't care so much about. And the things that were permanent in the home, those were the things I fought for. So as a woman and having a vision and wanting things to flow in your home, we might come to a financial place where Brady's like, look, this is what we can afford for a refrigerator or a light for this room. And I'd be like, I don't like it, but I can change it later. So this is not a battle for me.
Right.
So I tried to keep that in my mind. If it's permanent and there is like a specific thing, then maybe I fight a little harder. If it's something that can be changed down the line, then it's like
faucets,
I'm okay.
like faucets,
It'll be
plumbing
okay.
finish fixtures. Those were all on Amazon or open box at
Yeah.
Lowe's. Dad said, what's skill trading? Terry asked, what's skill trading? I thought everybody knew what skill trading. I thought that was like, I don't know. When I say skill trading, I mean, I have a list in my head of things I know that are monetarily valuable to people that people are willing to pay for. And then I'm trying to think of a good example of this. So like just last week.
Share about the slab for the downstairs bathroom because we ran out of time.
For the downstairs bathroom.
For the countertop. We were going to do concrete.
Oh.
And then skill trade.
Well, I haven't skill traded yet. I'm in debt to Matt Holman. I owe Matt Holman a favor. But Matt Holman did me a favor because we
were up against a time crunch and we needed we were going to do a concrete slab on top of a bathroom vanity and Bree just didn't have the time for it. And I said, what about wood? What about Matt? And so he called Matt and was like, do you have anything in your warehouse at these dimensions?
Yeah. But like in the simplest form, I think about like, we just hired a cleaning crew that's going to clean the house before we have the baby because we just finished construction. There's so many things that need cleaning. I'm like overwhelmed. Like this would take me forever. But I knew the person I wanted to work with. She cleans the office downtown, and I'm a marketer by trade. And so this was actually really, it seems like it'd be really easy to trade with people, and it's easier now. But it was hard during most of the build because I'd try and skill trade with plumbers, electricians, and be like, I don't need more leads. I don't need more business. I want my phone to ring less because there's not enough contractors. And so it's like, I can't talk somebody into generating leads for them because they literally want their phone to ring less. And so I Googled the cleaning company I wanted to work with, Alicia, and I Googled CO Clean in Roseburg, Oregon. I noticed they're not showing up in Google, and I reached out to her. I said, hey, love to have you come out of the house and clean it, booked it, and then said, hey, by the way, so that's one thing. I'd book it first, like decide on it first, and then bring into the conversation, are you interested in any sort of trade? So I said, I noticed you're not being found in Google. You're not showing up. If you want more business from Google, I can't guarantee it, but I can set you up for success and do this and that so that eventually you get more leads coming in for your cleaning business. That takes me 2 or 3 hours worth of time. And so it's like, here's what I would charge for that, $60, $80 an hour, whatever. which is close to her, cleaning rate or about the same as her cleaning rate, and say, okay, let's, cut the price in half. I'll trade straight across. I'll do 2 to 3 hours of Google setup for you, marketing work for you in exchange for 2 to 3 hours of cleaning. So, I was offered by our concrete guy to do that. We had talked about like, spending half a day or a day building a website for him, in exchange for, lowering the concrete bill.
So
Things like
it's taking a skill that you have and trading it for a skill somebody else has, or discounting some of the work based on some of the work you're going to give.
Like my plumber is thinking about doing concrete counters, so I might end up helping him with counters. People need video work done,
but Brady's very selective on what he skill trades because he also is a perfectionist and wants to give good value or whatever, and so he knows, like, he has a list in his head of like what things he skill trades. Skill trading for me means I offer my husband to somebody for the work we need on the house because I don't have the skill trading in that sense. Like, my skills are with like working with children, like as teacher and that sort of thing.
But I mean, it's
so
also
it's different. It's like when you're building a home, for skill trading, you have to have some things that work in relation to what's being done.
It's also friends. Like, I can't think of it. I'm bummed because I can't think of a specific example right now, but there were many where it was like, I know this person is good at this thing, or they know that I'm good at this thing. And I would just text someone and say, hey, can you help me out with this? Like, I just need these few specific things. It's going to take probably about this many hours. Can you stop by and help me out? Because I'm in a pinch. Like, hey, buddy, I need help wiring up these 3-way light switches. And, and I'll just tell them, I'm good for a favor. Like, I can owe you one. Like, call in a favor when I'm done with, like, after I'm done with the house. And so, it doesn't have to be super formal. There's no contract. It's just, I want a favor. Yeah, I'm no shame, no fear in asking to trade favors.
And sometimes that can be really valuable or comforting to the other person to be like, okay, when it's time for me to set up my website or it's time for me to work on this thing, I know I can call on Brady and I've got somebody to help me and I'm not just going to have to tackle that thing. So,
yep.
Skill training it feels good as well because you're giving somebody something of yourself that is benefiting them.
All right. We're going to share some photos and kind of, we're going to share a little bit about, sorry, I'm getting tired, y'all. It's like 7:30 and we've had a long day. Anyways,
I just came back from baby shower.
We had baby shower today. Well, you had baby shower today.
Yeah.
We'll talk about real quick. Sorry, I'm trying to find my notes. We talked about land, we talked about design, talk about the excavation, we'll talk about getting the slab in place and getting the skeleton up, and then we'll close it up here. Let me share these. This is us when we bought the land. This is what the land looked like before we did anything. So this is Chris Dirty Duck and his crew out there. If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast after the fact, I'm sorry, just go watch the YouTube channel. It's gonna be like a boring 5 minutes. This was after Chris put in the driveway in one day. This is when it was all excavated out. So we hired Pete Pappas to do the concrete, basically excavate for the slab, get the bolts in place before they did the pour for the steel building. And then what else? Did they do anything else?
They did all that rebar, and then we had footings in our thing.
So that was
the steel beams went.
So this was a really fun phase for us because we had a ton of energy still, like ton of ambition. It was just like get in there, get dirty, and not super specific.
And Chris had to take that entire had to take half of the hill back out. Remember? so that
Oh, yeah.
we could even put a concrete slab that big there. So
Yep.
as you can see, it's like fresh dirt on the right side. That was all excavated back
Yeah, that's right.
in order to prep a space.
Yeah, so this was super fun because we were, we knew at this point, we knew we were getting a 30 by 50 metal building. And so before this photo, we were out there with stakes, with wood stakes and, cans of whatever spray paint and marking up the ground, just like, where do we want our house to go? So
the only other
that's fun.
option for us, because we had already got the shell, was to push our home. If Chris was not able to take that hill back, we would have had to push our home forward and put it on augers, like
or piers or whatever,
to so that it wouldn't slide off the slope. So thankfully, Chris was able to give us what we needed in order to put it on our foundation
on
actual earth.
It wasn't on
fill.
fill. It wasn't on fill. None of it was on fill. So this is getting ready to do the slab. So this I went and rented a trencher. We did our own drains. We ran the drains beneath the slab for the plumbing. So we did that. That was really stressful because that was the first moment of doing something and thinking, oh, this is going to take me 1 to 2 days tops. And we had the concrete crew scheduled to pour. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is taking 4 times as long. That was the first sense of like, I'm in over my head.
We're shoveling rock out and putting it in wheelbarrows and putting in a pile where Brady told us to. So
yeah,
we were all out there as a family together, getting it ready for Pete Pappas and his crew.
Yep. And so I got this trencher. I was trenching for utilities. And this was, so little lesson here. I got this trencher. It was a complete waste of $450 because me not knowing code, this is before I learned the lesson of like pay contractors to educate you. I was still trying to do everything by myself. I didn't even have to trench for the plumbing. It ended up mostly sitting on top of the gravel and didn't even barely have to go into the dirt. It could just sit, below the slab. Anyways, not to get too nerdy, but little lesson in like, it pays to educate yourself beforehand and talk to people. That trencher was a waste of money. So as we go on, this is, excuse me, this is a couple days later. We ended up doing all of the drains, and
we had Dane Tornell and was it Geneva?
Sicily? I can't remember. It was Dane, Sicily. We had a couple of friends come out.
One of his girls came out and helped.
Yeah.
Course.
So we got all the plumbing in place, and then basically failed our first plumbing inspection because there were a couple leaks and then a couple connections that weren't the right type of connections. We had to redo those. Filled the whole thing up with water to see if it leaks. That sucked, but that was fun, just crawling around in dirt plumbing.
Oh, so what kind of glue did we wind up using? It was the blue glue, right?
No, we used the basic glue, and then we switched to like Christie's Red Hot. That's like the legit glue that plumbers use.
That
like
was the one that
thicker glue.
That's what caused us to fail. Was the
if you don't want leaks in your house, then use really thick, gnarly, hot glue.
Just go.
That's the lesson. One of the
intense stuff.
Like I used to before the house, I used to say,
don't go sucker free on the glue that you buy for your plumbing, because that's what Brady does. Is he's like, what's the best deal?
Don't go sucker free on fasteners and adhesives, anything that holds stuff together. Don't cheap out, spend more money. That's what I used to think contractors got overpaid. And then I learned through this is like one of the reasons you pay contractors is because they know what to buy and they know what to use and where not to cheap out on. Anyways, that was us passing our plumbing inspection. And this, hold on. This is a fun short story.
This is painful.
So this was the first, this was a terrible night. So I don't have any photos past this. So here's the situation. We had the plumbing in past the drain plumbing inspection. And then the concrete crew was scheduled to come in like the next day or 2 days to start putting rebar in so they could get the rebar ready to do the concrete. And I needed to get radiant heat because we have it's almost done being hooked up. I'm almost done with it, but we have PEX pipe, like plumbing running through our slab so we can heat the whole slab. And we had to get all of that in place before the concrete was poured. So that required by code 2 inches of foam insulation under the whole slab. And then stapling down PEX pipe in these specific patterns, like 1,800 feet of PEX pipe. We had to like roll it all out and staple it down to the foam. Anyways, we had to do that like the evening before concrete crew was showing up. And so
After we were done working, right?
after a day of work. So we got off work I think it was off like 4:00 that day. And we had 1,800 feet. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was about 1,800
So
feet.
each roll was 300 feet.
A 300-foot roll of plastic PEX pipe. Yeah.
And it had to be unwound a certain way so that it wouldn't like.
You gotta hold it in your arms. Like there's a really awkward way to do it.
And it's heavy and I'm vertically challenged. And so I would have to like hold it and then throw it up and catch it while Brady would wind it in the pattern that we had laid out in our floor plan. And the tricky part is you're going from room to room and there's no walls built yet. And so, but you have to make sure that you're not in a dead space or where, something where we're going to have
like appliances. So so basically in one night, I think the day before I had like put up string lines across the forms where all my walls were going to go. But basically in one night I had to like draw out my lines and figure out where I'm going to route all of this PEX pipe based on this super complicated, convoluted drawing that was given to me by the Radiant Heat Company.
And we had to redraw out a couple areas while we were running this 800 at night.
1,800 feet of PEX, yeah.
In the dark. Yeah.
So we're doing this in the evening. Anyways, this has taken forever. We get to I think we finally finished. Like we were debating stopping. I was like, oh, we got to stop. Sloan's arms and back were killing her. I was like dying. I'm like getting delirious, like about to fall over. We're so tired. And this is extreme. We didn't have like a ton of nights this extreme. This was probably one of the hardest ones.
Yeah. And we had that little gun with those little plastic horseshoes to that we had to go
the staple
in the ground,
gun. Yeah.
All the way around. We would switch jobs back and forth to see if it was easier on us or whatever. And it was just
Sloan's walking backwards, rolling out the 3-foot wide roll of PEX pipe, and I'm stapling it down with a stapler, routing it. But anyways, we finish up probably like midnight, 12:30. No, it's probably like 1:00 in the morning. We're out there with a couple flashlights rolling out PEX pipe. Mm-hmm. And then we get in the car. Headlights. And this is before we had our driveway paved. So you saw the picture of the driveway. It was super steep. It was just gravel. This is like one of my first times backing down the driveway. And it's 1 a.m. I'm not even thinking about it. And no. That was a different time. I high centered on a piece of riprap. I high centered the Honda on the rock.
It might have been that time.
I had a trailer with us. That's what it was. I had a trailer. I don't think Dane knows this. So Dane, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I didn't do any damage to it, but I have Dane's trailer hooked up to the Honda Element, and I'm going down the driveway, and I jackknifed the trailer.
Oh, because we had to get the foam and the pecs and everything up there.
Yeah, exactly. We had to get all the materials up. So this is at 1 a.m. after doing this for like 9 hours, whatever. And I jackknifed the trailer into the side of the driveway. I didn't get it stuck in the rocks, but I stopped and I was like, how the heck? Anyways, I end up having to get out of the car, dismount the trailer on super sketchy gravel, and this whole ordeal. I'm cussing a storm, just sweating blood. I'm so stressed out because I'm thinking this trailer is going to roll down the driveway.
The trailer doesn't take Brady down the driveway with him.
And yeah, so that was
as he's moving it slowly down.
Yeah. Zach said blue glue sucks. And then what are the best resources? I'll answer you in a sec. Zach, I will. I think that's Zach's channel. Anyways, so we finally get the freaking Honda and start going down the driveway that leads up to our driveway, like the gravel road. And I start to jackknife it again because it's like, it's 2:00 in the morning at this point. And I get to a spot where like I end up doing that again. I fix it. And on the way down, I end up like scraping the porta potty with the Honda. Anyways, long story short, I had to remount the trailer a couple times. You might, I'm terrible with a trailer, abysmal backing down a trailer, especially in the dark on a slope, steep, curved driveway. That was rough. That was a rough night. And then wake up the next morning and go to work. We had something specific going to work the next morning too, so I had to be in early. That was pretty brutal. Yeah, that was a hard night.
But we got it done.
And
we got home okay.
And so here's the this is so ridiculous looking at.
That's what we laid out.
Yeah, that's what we laid out. 1,800 feet of PEX pipe, stapled it down to the foam. Shout out to Brad. Brad Poose came and helped put some of the foam down. Mm-hmm. We put down that foam and PEX pipe in pretty much 1 to 2 nights.
We put foam down the night before, and then you and I went out and did the PEX.
Yeah. So fast forward, we're at an hour 40 minutes, so we'll wrap it up pretty shortly here. I'm running out of water.
We probably need to wrap it up by 8.
Yeah. So fast forward, this is, the slab once we got the plastic on it. So after the concrete was poured, so the poured concrete, it's curing, and then boom. I invited my younger brother, Brogan, and my dad up, and they came out for a week, 7 or 8 days. And we put up a steel frame building in a matter of days. I had to talk about unrealistic expectations. My dad is probably just laughing on the couch right now, just like rolling his eyes, like how much I thought we were going to get done. And I had stuff for siding ready. I had foam for the exterior of the building ready. I had all this stuff. And I'm like, completely unrealistic. Anyways, this was super cool. The steel building shows up on a flatbed after the guy like having a transmission failure.
Well, you can see the tire blown.
Oh yeah. So it was supposed to show up the day before, and the guy shows up like he had a transmission failure, had to replace the transmission overnight. Tire blew on the way there. Just like, this guy is having a nightmare of a trip from the Midwest to here, and finally gets here. And then this is essentially the skeleton to our house.
And he could barely drive it up that part of our neighborhood. But then there's another road that goes to our driveway, and then our driveway wasn't paved at this point.
He was going up
and is very steep and at a turn. And so we're like, how do we get these steel framed 27-foot beams?
We're like waiting days for this guy to get here
up to our property. Like, how do we even get him up there? So
we're waiting days for him to get here, and then he finally comes. We see him because we live on top of a hill, and we see him coming up, and I'm like, yeah.
He had to
and then we hear this diesel stall out
a few times just to get it to the bottom of the hill.
It was brutal. So he finally gets to like the bottom of the main driveway. And anyways, I'll fast forward. This is my dad in the forklift being a boss.
That's how we were able to do it. Chief saved the day with his forklift skills.
So if you want to build your own steel frame home or barnuminium, step 1, make sure you have a dad who in the military used to load C-130s with cargo. Is good with the forklift, because I am not good with a forklift. It's super awkward.
Tina, don't listen. He made me nervous a few times, but he totally knew what he was doing. It's just like he had to navigate to get those beams over where they needed to be. He had to navigate up on our property very strategically.
It was kind of sketch. Or it had the potential to be really sketch.
If it was an amateur driving it, it would have been sketch. But because
if it was me, it would have been sketchy. So the Sloan has better photos on the next podcast. I think next Sunday noon, or either noon or 6 sometime. I don't know. Just subscribe to the email list, because I might not post it on Facebook, but get on the email list and I'll tell you when the next podcast is going to go live. We'll do it next Sunday. But anyway, Sloan has better photos on her phone. We'll share a few more on the next one. I didn't have the best photos, but this is my dad driving the steel up the.
Because you were spotting where to go,
Oh, come on.
and I was taking photos.
Yes. Oh, where'd he go? Okay, here we go. Here's Sloan and I sitting on the steel, and then boom. So we put these trusses up, bolted them in
Oh,
place.
You don't have the pictures of your dad with the forklift and the beam hanging off of it with broken, and you like having to move the
Here
beam
we
into
go.
place.
I think we got a couple. So we basically bolt these trusses together on the ground, lifted them with a forklift. The forklift
There you
goes
go.
like 44 feet, something like that. This is my brother Brogan. And then I don't have photos of like the in between. We'll get some of us in the scissor lift putting these up, but this was over the span of like 6 days or so, getting all these columns up and all the wood up. Yeah, lifting those into place. And basically, my dad would lift it up on the forklift. I would monkey up, climb up the truss with tool belt on, slide some bolts in, and bolt them together, and then go up the other side, secure it. It was pretty crazy.
And that's 27 feet at the peak.
Yeah, 27 feet
For
at the peak.
context.
Yeah, 27 feet at the peak, 20 at the eaves. That's the three of us. Yeah, that was an awesome week. And then that is that's the view. That was, I think, the last day before my dad and my brother left. Boom. Yeah, that's it. That's all the photos I have from there. Zach said, what is the best resource for folks to look up all the codes for Douglas County? I should probably know that question. I'm not a general contractor.
You just called Phil a lot.
I called Phil a lot. So when we said,
whenever we didn't know a code, you just call him like, Phil, what is the code for this? And he was like,
yeah, so basically, when we submitted our plans, I say that in quotations because we didn't have like, you're supposed to have A pages, A sets, B sets, C sets, like all these, parts of your plans. And I just had, here's my foundation plan, and
saw your mom's
here's like this
emoji.
other hot mess of papers and like hand drawn blueprints and all this stuff. And so, anyways, when I submitted them, Phil, the amazing, gracious building inspector, said, he kind of sparked and he's like, yeah, we're going to work with you on this. He said, just call, we'll check in every once in a while. So they knew it needed more time and attention. But anyways, list of codes. If you go to the county website, county or city, depending on where you guys are at, you can get like the code and read through it. Here's the thing though. Here's the thing about code is that even contractors struggle with the code, and the code is black and white on paper, but it is so difficult to interpret that if you're building a house and you're not a contractor, I don't really recommend it. Probably would have been easier if I got my GC before this, but you got to know how to interpret it and why they wrote it. Like, what's the motive for the code? Because it's usually health and safety. It's almost always a safety thing. And anyways, the point I'm getting at is I would read something in the code. This happened a lot in the early stages. I would read something in the code. I'd go online, figure out how do I build the wall this way, or where does my electrical need to run for this? And then I would stress about like, oh, I can't do this to code, or this is going to be so difficult and expensive and time consuming. How do I do this? And I would stress over things that didn't matter at all because I was misinterpreting the code, because it says it, but you can easily misread it, even if you're smart. And then you might not know why it was written or what they're trying to protect with that code. And so, the inspector would be like, that doesn't matter. Or that code is written to protect this situation, this scenario that we run into. Don't worry about that. Mm-hmm. Because they have the, it's there as like, to cover anything that could potentially ever happen. So mm-hmm. The worst way to go about it is what I did in the early stages, which was like, look at
stress,
research all of it, and like look at everything like super granularly. It's just not a good way to go about it.
The truth is that I would say just expect that they'll just tell you, because we would have inspections and when we would hit an inspection, that's when we would find out that we overthought something or overdid something that we didn't need to do. And maybe that something wasn't up to code. And so the inspectors would just come through and be like, yeah, you just need to rewire this to here, like and it was usually minimal things. There wasn't ever like a huge thing, you know. If you do
Right.
go to their website to look up the code and then interpret it the best you can and do the work, just expect that when they come through, they might be like, have something they want you to change, but it's usually not going to be a huge ordeal that you're going to have to do.
Yep.
It's usually like slight adjustments.
Yeah. And we, Zach was asking, how often we have inspections. There's, in the Midwest, it's like you have your foundation and your framing and your final, and that's pretty much it. But we had, they like to lump them all together. So we did like pre-slab inspection for the drains and any electrical that was running under the slab, like for an island. We had electrical running through conduit. We had electrical, plumbing before sheetrock went up. We had like one inspection before sheetrock, to look over everything. Insulation inspection.
I feel like we had a lot of
they don't come out and announce, if that's what you're asking, like
right at the beginning.
They don't come at certain time frames.
And then a gap of like, we had like a few inspections right in the beginning, like with the slab, with the plumbing, underground plumbing, the slab, like
they want to see.
And then there was a time where we didn't have a bunch of inspections. There's like a lull, and then before you close everything up. Yeah. So like once you have your framing, everything's exposed. They don't want to come out a million times, so they're gonna wait until all of your finished plumbing and electrical and framing is done, and they'll come do all those inspections before you put the drywall and close it all where they can't see it. So it's like inspections at the beginning, inspections before you close up with drywall, and then inspections at the end. That's kind of what we wound up.
Yeah, it wasn't like I thought, inspector sounds so intense. The inspector is really there to make sure that you're building a safe house that makes sense and that you're going to enjoy. At least a good inspector. That's the experience I had here in Douglas County. Mm-hmm. But they didn't come through unannounced ever, I don't think. They didn't come through at specific intervals. They only came when I scheduled them to come by. And they were kind enough to come by even when I just needed a couple quick pointers that said, hey, I'm unclear about the code. I'm unsure about how to do this. Can you, come out here and talk me through this?
We had a physical, like laminated paper from the county.
Yeah, you have an inspection checklist. You got to keep at the job site.
So you see all the things that have to be checked off, and you would have that out and your plans out when they came. So, and then when you're ready for an inspection on that list, you call and say, hey, we're ready for these inspections to be done. And then they would schedule somebody. We would have those things out where they could see. They'd come through usually while we were at work, sign off on everything that looked good. If there was something that didn't pass inspection, they wouldn't sign. They would call and they would say, hey, we need you to do this thing. And then it was usually like maybe 2 days later or whatever, when it was fixed, they come back out. And then it was it.
Yeah. And I had my fair share of things I had to, fix along the way. It was pretty minor. It was never serious. Like there's never any, I always felt like I was going to get like a slap on the hand or that somebody's going to be frustrated with me. And I don't know, I tend to overthink and overcomplicate and worry about things that don't matter. So that was a big lesson through the house, but yeah, I fixed my fair share of things. Design and layout. Let's see.
What were a couple of things in the beginning that you had to fix?
Or a couple of things in the beginning that we had to fix.
Remember?
Yeah, Zach, you asked design and layout. So we're gonna do, hopefully, as long as baby's not born super early, we're gonna do 3 or 4 episodes like chronologically through the journey. This is by far the longest one. I don't think the others will be. We just really wanted to tell the story of like the struggle of it, and then the rest of them are going to be a little more upbeat, a little more fun and more interesting. Lots of photos, I promise. But anyways, my hope is at the end of it, we can do one. I want to do one where I really nerd out for people exactly like you, because I know you and I could nerd out for days on like material choices, design choices, construction methods, cost, why we chose certain things, how we designed the house. I want to dedicate an entire episode to that where I just nerd out on the technical stuff. But yeah, we're due March 29th. So we get, at the time of recording this, we're February 26th. Design layout, would you change anything if you could? No, I wouldn't. I might have had like a slightly bigger couple of closets, like enlarge the closets a tiny bit, maybe.
Storage
But it's
space.
always a compromise. So it's like everything in the house design is a compromise,
Mhm.
unless you're designing a mansion, but then you have a lot of upkeep and maintenance. So I love our
One
design.
thing that I wouldn't have changed is I stuck to my guns on that I didn't want to drop ceilings.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And
So
many people tried to convince us to do that things would be easier if we just would give up on that. And I was like, no, because we have small rooms. And so that would have made them feel even more small, claustrophobic.
yeah,
And we love them. Yes, it was a challenge. Yes, it made things way difficult. But in the end, we love it.
that's a good
And
note.
we're gonna love it.
That's a
forever.
good high note to wrap it up on. Is that Zach asked what minerals are in your grout and why? Dude, home renovision. I could nerd out on grout for days. Like I know a lot about grout. Anyways, but that's a good note to wrap it up on. And then we'll pick back up next Sunday. Is people not understanding your vision. I think that was, Tim pointed out to me a few days ago. Like I was saying, hey, what would be interesting to talk about on the podcast? And he's like, how did you communicate this vision to people and get them to buy into it and understand it, to the people doing the financing for the loan, to the county, to the appraiser, to your wife, to your coworkers, like to everybody that's involved in it, to contractors. They're coming over and saying, hey, all your studs are going the wrong way. Like literally multiple guys be like, your studs are going the wrong way. And you could see it on their face. Like the house was just frustrating to work on. And in the early stages, you see the photos, it looked like a giant shop. And some people think, oh, it's a guy lives in a shop. And so it was really difficult to sell people on the vision when I needed to work with them. But anyways, the point I was getting at was when you're hiring contractors and you're trying to get people on board, like the vision is the most important thing. They have to understand where you're headed, what it looks like. They got to be able to like see it, feel it, and know why you're headed there. It's like, and so I got really good at sharing that vision. And I said, this is what's important to us. Like I'd really quickly summarize. These are the things that we value. This is what's important to us. I want a giant studio upstairs in my house. I don't need a garage. I want a low maintenance home. And I don't care about these things. And I got really good at distilling that vision down. And so why did I bring that up? Like, why does it matter? Because you have people along the way that make you question why you set out to do specific things. And Son mentioned the drop ceilings, the design. I mean, that's kind of a superficial example. But we had multiple people. HVAC guy was the first one. Like, you guys should do drop ceilings. Our living room, you'll see photos, in future episodes. We'll roll out the photos as we progress, but it's 27 feet at the peak and 20 foot of these in the living room. So the whole living room is vaulted. It's gorgeous. And I love it. And just the feeling of being in there with the natural light, it feels so good. And it's really not even that expensive to heat because we have fans in there and we designed it well. It's not even expensive to heat. It's super efficient. And so I bring that up because multiple people tried to talk me out of my vision and said, you should do this, you should do this, you should do
And
this.
it's not that
Why do
we
you do
didn't
this?
consider it.
We always consider.
And we even drew it up and said, where could we drop the ceiling and not? And
Scott Wadsworth, the essential craftsman with a million subscriber YouTube channel, who's done carpentry his whole life, who works circles around me and did for parts of our build. Like, he tried to convince us to do drop ceiling, or at least made us consider.
Did educate us on why it would be beneficial in the bathrooms. That is where we did drop the ceilings, but we didn't compromise in the other places.
It wasn't, oh, your idea is dumb. This makes more sense. You should do it this way. It's like, here's the pros and cons.
He's always like,
hey, consider this.
Hey, consider this. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's your house and you got to love it. So.
But anyways, the point is, like, there's times when like nobody's going to understand your vision but you. And you just got to be okay with that. Like, I don't care if it's a house or something else in life, or if you're starting a podcast, or if you're making a piece of art, or you're wrenching on a car. Like, if you understand your vision and what it looks like and why you're doing it, then I don't know, just be content with that. And then when it's done, then you can just stand back.
But it goes both ways.
Oh,
like, be open-minded.
I love the HVAC guy, Zach.
Be able to listen too, because there's a lot of things that we wound up benefiting from hearing somebody explain why we should do something, and then we were like, okay, this is something worth considering,
Right.
And it benefited us, like dropping the ceilings in the bathroom because of how you don't want that heat to escape in a certain way, and
you want to get out of the shower and be cold.
Yeah. And so in things that we wouldn't have thought of and considered, and then, where is the ducting going to go if you don't have any drop ceilings anywhere upstairs? And so knowing our vision and where we wanted to have vaulted ceilings, if you want to call them that, and where it made sense because somebody was telling us or educating us on how our home could run more efficiently, or how we would feel better in a room by considering doing the drop ceiling. So it's both. It's knowing what you want and for your dream home, or where your non-negotiables are, and what you're willing to do for sweat equity to get there. Because we had to, in order to have deal with certain drop ceilings and not in other places, we had to put in extra framing and extra work.
There's a lot of extra work.
So it's like, you want that thing, you're going to have to work for it, but also consider other people, because other people would have great ideas too.
Yep.
So
yeah, actually, Zach, I changed my answer. If I if I could change anything, I would drop the height just a couple feet, like just literally like 2 feet, make it a little less high.
Oh, we're not
This is
even
where-
going to talk about the roof.
She disagrees. I wouldn't have done a 6/12 pitch. I wanted 4/12 pitch because I'm going to be the one up on the roof.
okay, but I'm going to share that every single
lost that battle.
house on every single street, ours and all the ones below us, have what is ours? A 6/12? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Have 6/12 pitch. And with all the things that we knew we were going to fight with having non-traditional build, one thing we wanted to appease for the neighborhood and how it flows with the neighborhood
That's true.
and being considerate. I wanted to land on a roof pitch that
It is
that matched.
it is a cathedral. It is the steel cathedral.
And your studio would look a whole lot different if we didn't have that pitch.
This is true. True. All right, we'll wrap it up. Atticus is here, and Atticus Puck, before we close it out, what was your favorite thing about building a house, and what was your least favorite thing? Come here.
We didn't even give him time to think on this.
No
prior
prep. This
to.
is how it goes when your dad does podcasts. What was the most fun about building? Was there anything fun?
All the scrap wood.
All the scrap wood.
Oh,
Atticus
because he got to build things.
Atticus has the world's largest scrap wood pile. If anyone needs scrap wood, come and get it. We're gonna
If
have a
you
giant
remind
pile.
me, I'll look for a couple of pictures of things that he built out of the scrap wood.
What was the most difficult part about building a house?
Living in the RV.
Living in the RV. 2
I would
months,
agree.
2 to 3 months of RV living at the very end.
No, not 2 to 3 months. That was more than that.
Yeah, we'll get
We
to
were
that.
in there in September and didn't get out of there until December, January.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, thanks so much, y'all, friends, family, for hopping on. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for hearing the story. Hopefully you're encouraged by some part of that. Yeah, I promise more photos on the next one. I'll spend more time prepping and getting some really sexy photos for y'all. Ask some questions, and yeah, get on the email list if you want to know when the next one is. It'll be next Sunday, a week from today. I just don't know the specific time, but I'll give everyone on the email list a heads up. Allison, Mom, Dad, Chris, Bruce, Terry,
Oh,
Gordon, Drinda, hey, Kara and Caleb, Matt Holman, Vic, Zach, Chris Bello. What's up, dude? Thanks everybody for hopping on. That's it. We will see y'all next week.
Bye.
Love y'all. Oh, I had that up because I was going to share a picture of the house. Oh, anyone who exited out doesn't get to see it.
Okay, Dad, don't take down any
Hold
of
on.
the
Here it
stuff.
goes. I was going to share a teaser so that way people can actually know.
Oh,
That's what the house looks like right now.
are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live.
Oh,
Okay, bye guys.
Bye.